Hi there, we're going to talk about a band skill that seems really basic, but it's something that a lot of band students struggle to do well. So here's what I'm talking about. So it's just tongued notes on a repeated pitch, and it seems really simple, right? Well, there's a lot that goes into doing that correctly. In this video, I want to talk about 5 ways that students often don't quite do it right, and what band instructors can do to help them do it better. Let's first look at this waveform for a recording that I did earlier, and looking at this is going to help us to visualize a couple of things that we want to listen for. First thing is we want to listen and watch for more or less a straight line through the waveform, and this is going to show us a couple of things. The first thing, if it's straight, it shows us that the embouchure is steady and it's allowing the student to produce a steady tone. If the student's embouchure is moving around, it's going to lead to an inconsistent response, and you're not going to hear that straight line through the waveform. So that's one thing to listen and watch for. The other thing that we can see in the waveform has to do with airstream. Since the height of the waveform reflects volume, an even waveform reflects even volume and therefore a consistent airstream. And this is a really big clue to see if the student has the right air and tongue concept. Not that this is the only appropriate way to play tongue notes, but it's a necessary one that students often struggle to do well. A lot of times when you listen to students, you'll hear a variation of their notes. So when they tongue, you'll hear either decay in their notes or a swell or just inconsistency from one note to the next. If a student isn't playing this with consistent volume and tone, have them back up a step, take out the tonguing and just focus on playing a steady long tone. And then once the embouchure and the airstream are set, then you can add back the tonguing, still maintaining that consistent volume and tone. After embouchure and airstream, the third thing that you want to listen for is breath endurance. Are students making it through the whole phrase without taking a breath in the middle? Now, you may need to adjust the phrase length if students are younger or if they're playing instruments that require more air. But I find that by the end of year 2 of playing that most students should be able to make it through the phrase length that I just played earlier. Now, if they're still struggling to make it all the way through, it may be less of an issue of physical ability and more about just the habits that they've developed. Students start out breathing with a certain frequency, like every measure. And then as they become physically more able to sustain a longer phrase, they still are in the habit of breathing more often than they need to. So first of all, give students a phrase length they can achieve. And then you can go back to just a long tone again. Have the students sustain the note for as long as they would need to get through the phrase, and once they know that they can do that, add the tonguing back in, have them practice getting through the phrase without breathing in the middle. Another way that students might need to improve their approach to this is the tonguing technique itself. So listen for the sound of the articulation. Does it sound too lippy and explosive? Or does it sound too weak? Or does it look and sound like they're closing their mouth to separate the notes instead of using their tongue like this? Those are all common things in young players. So if that's the case, spend some time working on tonguing technique itself. Brass players and flute players are going to tongue the same way. You want to aim for a 2-syllable where the tongue moves up and down, not forward and backward, and it stays behind the teeth, not touching the lips. For those who play reed instruments, have them focus on just lightly touching the tip of the reed, not the flat part of the reed, to help them avoid a heavy articulation. Finally, listen for pitch. Does the pitch of each tongue note remain steady or does it fluctuate? This graph shows relatively stable pitch through each note. But as you listen to your students, you might hear a spike in pitch at the beginning of each note, or you might see it start off low and then come back up. And clarinet and saxophone players are notorious for this, that they'll start their tonguing with the back of their tonguing, which also opens up their jaw, leading it to a flat sound, and then they scoop the note back up into pitch. So if that's happening, encourage your students to play with an even, steady jaw and tongue only with the front part of their tongue to help pitch remain consistent from one note to the next. Now, it's one thing to give students the information that they need to do these skills well, but what they really need is the opportunity to practice them frequently. They need to become ingrained physical habits that students can do without having to think about them. I find that the band warm-up time is a really good time to do this kind of work, and I've included this sort of exercise in all of the warm-ups that I use. And my warm-ups are a system that I developed that takes students from every semester all the way through their first 4 years of band. The best part about them is that they're all automated using an audio track. So all I have to do is press play, and it leads students through a 1-minute countdown, letting them know that rehearsal is about to start, and then it takes them through their warm-ups, whether I can be up on front in the podium or not. Sometimes I get pulled, as I'm sure you do, in different directions to get music or fix an instrument, but this leads to a consistent start to rehearsal every time. If you're interested in checking out those warm-ups, you can find them at amplifiedwarmups.com. But anyway, try this exercise. I hope it's helpful for you and for your students. Thanks for watching.